Hello and welcome to the Engaging People podcast. My name's Charles Rogel. I'm a senior consultant here at DecisionWise. I'll be moderating today's conversation. Today we're doing another episode of Meet the Consultant, and the consultant that we're going to be talking to today is Thomas Olsen.
Hey everyone.
So Thomas, I want to kind of have you start off by introducing yourself a bit and talking somewhat about your background, history. So we'll get into your career background, but first I want you to talk about kind of where you grew up, because being a Dane, I find that extremely fascinating about you. I know nothing about Danish people, and I just find your taste in music somewhat interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Charles. So yeah, I was born and raised in Denmark, just outside Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark. Had a pretty normal upbringing, I think. Rode my bike everywhere, like most Danes.
Here they do that. Yeah.
There's a lot of bikes, and there's a lot of rain, so it doesn't really work that well together. But that's just what
you still bike in the rain.
Still bike in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just had a pretty normal childhood. I played basketball. I played American football is what we'd call it. We'd call soccer football over there. But just always liked, kind of the U.S. And I was actually a foreign exchange student.
Oh, okay.
In high school, back in high school days.
Where'd you go?
I went to up by Logan.
Okay, in Utah.
All right. Yeah. And spent a year there in high school, ran cross country and played basketball and things like that. So
neat. Fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more then about your educational background, what got you into consulting, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So I moved to the U.S. about 13 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I met my wife, who's from California. I met her over in Denmark, and we got married. She got a little bit homesick. I was a little tired of school over there, and so we moved to the U.S. So I've been here about 13 years. And
big culture shock for you at the time?
I'd been a foreign exchange student, so I'd lived here for almost a year, and I grew up watching, which is probably not a good representation of the U.S., but I grew up watching Full House and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And so
you're down with the culture then.
Yeah, and I think that's partly. I've had English since second grade, actually since fourth grade. I think now they started in second grade, but. Mm-hmm. And then, you just watch a lot of movies with just subtitles, so you hear a lot of the American kind of influence there. But yeah, so we moved to the U.S. I went to BYU, did an undergrad in business strategy.
Okay.
I always liked business a lot. And it was, when I graduated, the economy wasn't amazing, so I went and worked in a Sears store in California in this national management training program. And it wasn't my dream job, but...
Sure.
Honestly, it was a good experience to be, a leader for these hourly employees, and really that was kind of my first
whole different
step into employee engagement in a lot of ways, because you had to find ways to motivate some of these employees. They were minimum wage. It wasn't the greatest job in the world, stocking shelves in a retail store, but I tried to give them, experiences that would be valuable to them, and I tried to be a good leader for those people. So I liked it. And then I had a chance to come out to our corporate office in Chicago.
Cool.
So I was at Sears Corporate for about 2.5 years, where I worked in supply chain and finance.
Was this in the big Sears building, downtown Chicago, tallest building?
No, so that one is now the Willis Tower.
Yeah.
Even though locals still like to call it the Sears Tower. But they'd moved outside in the suburbs.
Oh, okay.
10 years previous. And
all
so big campus out there, and but I learned some great things about, spreadsheets, data analysis, and just kind of, taking big sets of data and analyzing them and making conclusions based on that and decisions based on that. So it was a really good experience. I then had a chance to move back to Utah, where I had lived during school.
Yeah.
And I worked at Qualtrics, which they do 360 assessments and employee engagement as well, but it's more of a hands-off approach, where it's just the software, and I was just selling the software. But I had a lot of conversations with clients about engagement and 360s and things like that.
Strategy,
yeah. But we didn't provide any sort of consulting or anything like that. It was just kind of here's the login. Yeah, do it yourself. And I liked it so much that I decided to go back to school. So I pivoted, and I went back to do a full-time MBA at BYU. Mm-hmm. They have a really good HR track. They now call it strategic HR. It was called organizational behavior and human resources, but now it's called strategic HR.
Okay.
And during that time, I had a really interesting internship at Cisco in the Bay Area, where I was on this team analytics and research team. So they have this big leadership and team intelligence part of their HR function.
Sure.
So it's this huge team that deals with basically just like listening to employees and team analytics and things like that. So, they devoted a lot of resources to that. So it was really interesting. I worked on a project around trying to tie KPIs and revenue to engagement, which, I think engagement is sometimes, it's hard to tie that to revenue.
Right, that's the panacea,
so,
right?
Yeah.
That's what everyone's looking for.
And
how did it work?
No, that's a good question. So there was, I looked at the sort of the 25 best teams in sales,
mm-hmm.
and found that those were also some of the highest revenue attaining teams. A lot of them were, 10% higher than most of the other teams in revenue attainment.
So the best teams were the most engaged teams, or what was the? What were
yeah.
you
So
judging?
yes,
okay.
The best teams measured in engagement. Those were
also the best performing.
Yeah. So there was a correlation there. So the next step was to, sit down and talk to those managers, figure out what are they doing differently, and what can we learn from them, and then take that and apply that to all the different teams at Cisco. And then the bigger team, there was 10 MBA interns from different schools around the country, and our big project was helping Cisco manage employee engagement during times of transition. So we came up with different ideas to how to do that.
Yeah.
I then went full time with Polaris. They make razors, Rangers, Indian motorcycles. Spent some time as an HR business partner. So I feel like that's really helped me.
In Minnesota?
In Minnesota, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It was very cold. It was negative 52 last winter.
Nice.
And so you just I didn't go to work that day. I worked from home.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to chance it.
Yeah.
My car
dying or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a good experience. I got to work with some really interesting business leaders and just deal with a lot of those issues that I think a lot of our clients here at DecisionWise deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to DecisionWise. I've always been, as you can kind of tell from my background, I have always been interested in employee engagement and just leadership development, change management, and things like that. So
cool. With an analytical kind of
I think it is important to, and that's something that I've seen here is, we look at the data and we look at the results that come in from the engagement survey, and then we try to make, recommendations based out of data, and not necessarily, we have the open-ended comments, but that's just a little part of it.
Interesting. Okay.
So
then talk about, I guess, your role now with DecisionWise, your approach to working with clients.
Sure. So I think, like I said, I've had, the last couple of years I've spent in HR. And so I think for me, it's important to just get to know the clients that we're working with and understand a little bit about them and what their responsibility is. And then also just understand where the company is and what are some of the things that's been happening in the last couple of years. I just think that's an important part of engagement is understanding changes that have happened. Has there been leadership transitions, big leadership transitions, new CEO? Has there been mergers and acquisitions and things like that? I think that's just to have that kind of good base for understanding the company and also who we're working with directly at the company. And then I think, what's the goal and what is it that our client is wanting to accomplish with this engagement survey? Engagement survey. Are there certain things that they already kind of know? Mm-hmm. Do they have a hunch about what's been going on? And we have worked with some clients for, several years. And so we have an idea of some of the things that happened last year and some of the things that they've been working on, in the previous year.
Yeah, measure against those initiatives. So in terms of, I guess, your philosophy on engagement and leadership, how do you kind of encapsulate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important for, and that's one of the conversations we would have on our calls with our clients is there buy-in from the executives? is this something that HR is championing, or is this something that came down from, is this something the CEO really wanted? And if not, are there ways that we can get that buy-in? Because I think one of the important things for me, and I've seen engagement surveys done at companies I've been at over the years where changes were made based on the engagement survey, and I felt like, man, they listened to us, to the employees.
Right.
And I've been at other organizations or companies where we did an engagement survey and then, nothing happened.
Sure.
And there wasn't anything communicated. There was nothing. And then you just, you feel as an employee like it didn't really matter.
Right.
And then you're not as motivated
Wasted time
to do it again.
Yep.
So for me, that's, it's important to get that leadership buy-in, both from HR, but also from executives. And then I think it's important not to have, not to get an engagement survey back and then try and fix everything on there.
Yeah.
I think it's important to just take 2 or 3 items on there and say, these are the things that we're going to focus on for the next year. And something tangible, again, that you can, like I said, I think it's very important to communicate to the employees. Here's some of the results from the survey. Here's some of the things that we see as issues, and here's some of the things that we're going to do, just to show that you're listening and that you are going to make changes based on the feedback.
Yeah, but don't bite off more than you can chew.
Yeah.
And so then in terms of, client success stories or examples maybe of how things have worked well or not so well, what kind of ideas or experience would you share?
Yeah, so I worked during my MBA. I did this kind of side project with a small tech company here in Utah, less than 100 people, and we did kind of a standard employee engagement survey, and I also did 360s for the executive team, so there's about 10 of them. Okay. And there were some interesting things. Like any other startup, I think there's a lot of small things that need to be fixed here and there. And so, there was things that came back that was just really valuable to the executive team. They'd never thought about, and things that they
had no idea.
Yeah, no idea about. And some of them were, like I said, were just small things that were easy to change. Some of them were a little bit, more sensitive issues that we had to figure out how to communicate back to the employees that there were going to be changes made. The 360 was really interesting. The CEO got some really, you say harsh feedback. He got some really honest feedback, and I think feedback that he hadn't expected. Yeah. But he had buy-in. He was really, ready for the survey, or he was ready for this 360 to come back. Yeah. And so, even though it was kind of a tough conversation, and it was tough sitting in a meeting with him and his executives, but I was kind of the facilitator there and just helped talk through some of the things. We talked about a lot of his strengths too, but there really was a lot of feedback that was hard for him to hear. But he made some really good changes over the next couple of months that really made an impact on that company. So that was a really that was really kind of the first engagement survey that I was part of. Yeah. First experience, and then your eyes were open, and then you were addicted to it, right? It's like, I want to do more of this. Well, that's excellent. Well, Thomas, thank you very much for the brief introduction today. Thanks, everyone, for joining our podcast today, and we look forward to having you join us on a future podcast.